Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The West Memphis 3 case. On May 5, 1993, the weather was perfect in the small town of West Memphis, located in Crittenden County, United States. The 3 8-year-old friends were getting ready at their homes to go out and play. The boys had met at Weaver Elementary School, and what brought them together was the local scout group, where all 3 had reached the rank of novice scouts. First, there was Stevie Edward Branch, born on November 26, 1984, the son of Stephen and Pamela Branch. His parents had divorced when he was young, and later his mother married Terry Hobbs. Years later, the family expanded with the birth of his younger sister. Stevie was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 64 pounds, and had dark blonde hair. He was an honor student with a promising future, but at that moment, he was just a child. That day, he put on a white shirt and blue jeans, left his house on his black and red bicycle. Second was Christopher Byers, born on June 23, 1984, to parents Melissa DeFeer and Rick Moore. His parents divorced when he was just 4 years old, and shortly after, his mother married John Mark Byers, who adopted him, along with his 13-year-old brother, creating a new family. Christopher was the smallest of the group, standing at about 4 feet, weighing around 51 pounds, and had light brown hair. His physique matched his personality. He was very sweet and innocent. He wore blue pants, dark shoes, a white long-sleeve shirt, and headed to his destination. The group was completed with Michael James Moore, born on July 27, 1984, to parents Todd and Dana Moore, and he had an older sister. Michael was the leader and stood out for his strong personality. He was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 77 pounds, and had brown hair. Before leaving, he put on blue pants, a Boy Scout shirt, and a cap from the same organization. He liked wearing the uniform even when he wasn't at scout meetings. He was a real enthusiast. He rode on his green bicycle to meet Christopher and Stevie. The 3 boys headed toward the Robin Hood Hills, where they played all afternoon. Around 6:30 p.m., Christopher's stepfather started calling them to come home, but he only heard the echo of his own voice in response. After half an hour of waiting and growing anxious, Mark Byers decided to go to the police station to report the 3 boys missing. Although the authorities began a search, it had to be limited because it was already very dark, and the trees covered the entire area. Nevertheless, families and neighbors carried out their own search until dawn, but they could not find any trace of the 3 children. At the break of dawn the next day, the police started a more comprehensive investigation, led by the search and rescue personnel of Crittenden County. They searched every corner of the forest, but they could not find even a single clue. Around 1:45 in the afternoon, just when they thought all hope was lost, they reached the Robin Hood Hills, the wooded area where the boys had last been seen. Officer Steve Jones spotted a black shoe floating in a creek, leading to the largest drainage channel in the hills. He alerted his supervisors, and they acted quickly, searching the area downstream of the ditch. There, they encountered the most shocking sight of their lives. The lifeless bodies of the 3 children were at the bottom of a lake, having been tied hand and foot with their own shoelaces. Their right ankles were tied to their right wrists behind their backs, and the same was done with their left legs and arms. The horror did not end there. Both Michael and Steve had bruises all over their bodies. Christopher, on the other hand, had bruises and abrasions on various parts of his body, as well as cuts on his private parts and bite marks. However, this was not of particular attention to the detectives. No one could understand the magnitude of the crime. It had been perpetrated with a cruelty that transcended human limits. At the bottom of the same muddy ditch, wrapped around sticks, they found the children's clothing. Most of the garments were inside out, as if they had been hastily removed. Something that particularly caught the detectives' attention was that the underwear of 2 of the children was nowhere to be found, and one pair of pants had traces of fluid, leading to speculation about a possible motive of sexual assault. However, before drawing any conclusions, they had to wait for the forensic analysis. The case was just beginning. The investigation process was hindered because the officers had removed the bodies from where they were found before the forensic scientists arrived to conduct the pertinent studies. The crime scene was contaminated, as the chief of police was continuously smoking, throwing cigarette butts into the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The hypothesis of sexual abuse was discarded because the studies showed that the wounds were the result of a knife attack, and there were no signs of sexual abuse on the bodies of the minors. Speculation began about the possibility that the children had been attacked somewhere near the woods and then murdered in the ditch. Christopher's autopsy stood out from the rest. He was the only victim with drugs present in his system, specifically Ritalin. While the boy took the medication daily due to his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the dose found in him corresponded to a level higher than that indicated by his therapist. The details emerging from the case were increasingly disturbing, and the townspeople grew more and more anxious, exerting pressure on the police. They were desperate for a quick resolution and a culprit to blame. Suddenly, it seemed as if a light had been shown on a potential suspect, a teenager who seemed to fit the criminal profile. His name was Damien Eccles. He was 18 years old and had a substantial record of minor offenses, such as vandalism and theft. He had dropped out of high school and had been institutionalized due to mental health issues. The police, who had been speculating for some time, saw him as the perfect scapegoat. Eccles was always attracting too much attention with his heavy metal band fandom, his interest in pagan religion, his dark clothing, and his black hair, making the townspeople feel scandalized whenever they saw him. His family, being from a lower social class and having had interactions with social services on several occasions, was also known to the police. On May 7, 1993, Eccles was interrogated for the first time. He denied knowing the 3 murdered children or having anything to do with the case. He even agreed to a polygraph test, which suggested that he was innocent. However, prejudices persisted, and there was no concrete evidence against him. Despite this, the media and the entire town had already deemed him guilty. Public opinion alone was not enough to close the case. The manager of Bojangles, a local restaurant, contacted the police for the second time that week. After seeing the case on television, he believed there might be a connection to an incident that had occurred at his restaurant on May 5th, near where the bodies were discovered. At 8:40 p.m. on the day of the children's disappearance, he had called the West Memphis Police Department to report a strange incident. A man with brown hair had entered the restaurant, covered in blood, with muddy feet, a bruised arm, and appearing disoriented. He had then gone into the women's bathroom. A few minutes later, the man left the restaurant, and the employees discovered blood smeared on the walls of the bathroom. Officer Regina Meek responded to the call, speaking to the manager through a drive-through window. She didn't seem particularly concerned about the information and left without checking the bathroom. After the manager's second call, Detective Bryn Ridge and Sergeant Mike Allen returned to the restaurant, this time with a more proactive approach. They collected scrapings of the blood from the bathroom wall, but did not bother to question the other employees about the incident. The scrapings were never sent to a crime lab for analysis and were later declared lost. The lead was dismissed because the prosecutor argued that it was completely absurd to think that the person who committed the murders and took great care to hide the bodies, clothes, and bikes of the children would enter a public place covered in blood. Moreover, the injuries would have made it very difficult for one person to have killed all 3 boys alone. The police were desperate for someone to bear witness to the crime that they believed Eccles had committed. They interrogated Jesse Miskelly Jr., a 16-year-old with a mental disability, for 12 hours without the presence of his parents or an attorney. After numerous twists and turns, Miskelly implicated himself, Eccles, and Jason Baldwin in the crime, despite not having any connection to Eccles. However, his statement was inconsistent with the forensic evidence, as he described the boys being tied up with an industrial rope, whereas they were actually bound with their own shoelaces. Within a few hours, Miskelly retracted his statement, even providing an alibi that he was in another town watching a wrestling match on the night of the murders. But it was too late. The police had what they needed: 3 perfect suspects, capable of creating 3 distinct knots to subdue the victims, just as the crime scene suggested. The media frenzy that ensued portrayed the 3 suspects as guilty, further fueled by the satanic panic phenomenon sweeping across the United States at the time, where heinous crimes were often associated with devil worship and the resurgence of cults. The West Memphis authorities crafted a strong narrative against the 3 young men, labeling them as outcasts who had committed the murders as part of a satanic ritual. When Eccles' home was searched, a book with a pentagram on the cover was found. The police saw this as sufficient evidence to claim that the 3 teenagers were involved in a black magic cult, shaping the narrative they wanted to impose on the public consciousness. People began to come forward claiming they had seen Eccles near the crime scene. Detectives managed to interview 2 girls aged 12 and 15 who claimed they had heard Damien confess to the murders. An anonymous statement claimed to have seen Eccles covered in mud on the night the children disappeared. However, the real lead was provided by a woman named Vicki Hutchison. She said her son Aaron, who sometimes played with the 3 young victims, had seen strange things in the woods. Nonetheless, her statement was dismissed due to its lack of solidity. Vicki didn't give up and provided a second statement in which she claimed to have seen the teenagers performing a ritual, which later turned into debauchery, on the same night the victims disappeared. She alleged that the teenagers had abused the boys. However, there was no evidence of this on any of the bodies, and her testimony was extremely odd. Vicki committed to gathering more evidence and invited Damien to her home for a conversation. She hid a microphone and recorded every second of their talk. However, the young man didn't say anything that could be used against him. Frustrated by the lack of evidence, the police stated that the tape was inaudible, but didn't prove Eccles' innocence under any circumstances. Both he and Jason were arrested on June 3 of that same year. Jesse Miskelly Jr. was tried separately from the other 2 accused, providing several statements that did not match the facts narrated by the prosecution. The trial was heated, and an expert on false confessions stated that the young man had suffered from police coercion. They had taken advantage of his mental condition to tell him a version of the crime, and he ended up believing it. However, none of this was taken into account when delivering the sentence. On February 5, 1994, Miskelly was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Although he avoided the death penalty, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment plus 40 years. The trial of Eccles and Baldwin was as scandalous as their companions. Evidence used included Stephen King books, black metal band flags, and song lyrics written on the walls of the accused rooms. The verdict was emphatic. The young men were part of a satanic cult and had murdered the children to carry out a ritual. Fibers and a knife found by divers in a lake behind Baldwin's house were also presented as evidence. However, it couldn't be proven that any of these items belonged to the accused youths. It was circumstantial evidence, and they were not given the right to appeal. Much of the evidence that the defense attorneys hoped to present was excluded by the judge. Eccles was sentenced to death by lethal injection for being the mastermind of the crimes, while Baldwin was sentenced to life imprisonment. When asked if there was any reason why the sentence should not be pronounced, Baldwin reaffirmed his innocence. Eccles, completely devastated, shook his head. The execution date was scheduled for May 5, 1994, but nothing was that simple. For the victims' families, the sentence had been handed down too quickly, and there were unresolved issues, which began the most mediatic part of the case, attracting the attention of the most unexpected figures. The young men were already known throughout the country as the West Memphis Three. The case aroused the interest of several prominent figures in the music world, whom Eccles and Baldwin listened to. Among them was Pearl Jam's lead singer, Eddie Vedder, who helped raise money for their legal defense. Natalie Maines, the lead singer of the Dixie Chicks, also joined the cause of the trio. The metal band Corrosion of Conformity included a song inspired by the case called Free the Three in their album Wise Blood. But it wasn't just musicians who were part of the media defense. The young men also received support from Johnny Depp and several film directors. In 2007, with significantly more advanced technology, new DNA tests were conducted. These tests showed that there was no trace of the three accused on the bodies of the children. The bite marks also did not match any of them. Most shockingly, the results suggested the presence of other individuals at the crime scene. A hair found on one of the shoelaces of Michael Moore was consistent with the DNA of Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather. Hobbs had a criminal record and was known in the town for having a long history of mistreatment, including assaulting his wife, allegations of hitting minors, and attacks on neighbors. Another hair found near the crime scene on a tree stump was consistent with the DNA of a friend of Hobbs, named David Jacoby. Both claimed to have been together on the night of the murders. Hobbs emphasized that he believed the guilty parties were already behind bars. However, 3 witnesses presented sworn statements claiming they saw Hobbs with the children on the night they disappeared. The police did not initiate legal actions against him, but the media did. Peter Jackson, the renowned director, began producing a documentary with the goal of reconstructing the events, pointing at Stevie's stepfather as the murderer. New testimonies were collected. Jo Lynn Mackay, Michael Moore's mother, claimed she saw Hobbs washing clothes on the night of the murders, presumably to clean mud off his clothes. Additionally, a cherished pocket knife belonging to Stevie, which he almost always carried with him, was later found among Hobbs' possessions. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, 3 young men claimed that a nephew of Hobbs told them his uncle had been the murderer, but it was a family secret. Opinions among the victims' families began to diverge. The stepfather of Christopher Byers started to suspect Hobbs, even calling him a child murderer. However, Todd Moore believed that the evidence against Hobbs was not convincing. He pointed out that his son spent a lot of time at Stevie's house and could have easily picked up a hair with DNA on his shoelaces on one of those occasions. The tipping point came with the reappearance of Vicky Hutchison, who admitted that she had agreed to collaborate with the police in exchange for a $30,000 reward. She was supposed to provide false information to implicate Eccles. This revelation indicated it was time to redeem the West Memphis Three. In 2010, 17 years after the crime, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered that the DNA evidence must lead to a new trial. The West Memphis Three reached an agreement with the prosecution, adhering to the Alford plea, which allowed them to assert their innocence, while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. On August 19, 2011, they were released on a suspended sentence of 10 years, after having spent 18 years in prison. However, they remain on probation and could be incarcerated again for more than 21 years if they reoffend. The procedure allowed the accused to freely express that they are innocent, even though their official record still lists them as guilty. In interviews given after their release, Baldwin stated that he had been reluctant to plead guilty to crimes he did not commit, but he did so to spare Eccles from the death penalty. Although the families of 2 of the victims came to believe that the trio was innocent, a spectator shouted "murderers" at the 3 as they left the courthouse. it would be very difficult to undo the scandal that the West Memphis police had constructed. In a press conference, the three, now adults, stated that their main concern was clearing their names. In 2013, a new version of the story emerged from Billy Wayne Stewart, a self-confessed drug dealer, and Benny Guy, a convicted felon. The story was not firsthand, but had reached them through Buddy Lucas, a teenager from the town. On May 5, 1993, Buddy had gone out with Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, and his friend John Mark Byers to buy marijuana from Stewart. They then got into Hobbs' truck and drove around the city, smoking and drinking whiskey. They reached a wooded area, and at that moment, Hobbs asked the two teenagers to get out and fight while he and Jacoby watched in a fetishistic act. It was unclear whether this led to any intimate activity. During the course of that afternoon, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch appeared on their bicycles. Upon realizing they were witnessing something they shouldn't, they decided to leave, but it was too late. Hobbs shouted at his companions to stop the boys, while Jacoby hit one of them. That's when the attack occurred, resulting in the mutilation of Christopher's genitals. The other boys had seen too much, so they decided to kill them all. The clothing and bodies of the boys were collected and dragged to the water, and their bicycles were thrown into the swamp. According to Stewart, when he tried to call the West Memphis police investigator to tell him Buddy Lucas' story, he didn't even bother to return the calls. These statements are public knowledge, but the case remains closed. It is unclear if the authorities prefer to leave the case as a collective myth rather than seeking true justice for the victims and their families. And well, that brings us to the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another Unreal True Crime. See you soon. The Case of Jessica Gutierrez. Jessica Gutierrez, warmly known as Jessie by her family, was born on December 3, 1981, in the United States. She was the youngest amongst her three siblings. The family lived in a modest mobile home located in the rural area of South Carolina. In 1983, the tranquility was disrupted when Jessica's parents divorced. The children were left in the full custody of their mother, Deborah, while David Gutierrez, their father, moved to Mexico, maintaining a transient lifestyle between there and California. Following the divorce, Deborah worked diligently, finding employment at the United States Postal Service to meet the needs of her family, ensuring their well-being despite the challenges of raising 4 children alone. In June of 1986, Deborah found herself entangled with a man whose behavior grew progressively controlling and problematic, exacerbated by his increasing alcohol consumption. Eventually, his behavior reached a tipping point, leading to his expulsion from Deborah's life and home. However, Deborah's hope for respite was short-lived as her life plunged into further darkness. On June 5, 1986, a seemingly typical early summer day unfolded in South Carolina. The weather was pleasant, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, clouds ornamenting the sky. The family spent their day indulging in outdoor activities and nurturing familial bonds. The day concluded with Deborah preparing sandwiches for dinner and painting Jessica's nails before the children were put to bed. Jessica, maintaining her usual habits, requested to sleep in her mother's bed, a request granted by Deborah. However, when her elder brother experienced discomfort and pain later in the night, Deborah allowed him to sleep in her bed, relocating Jessica to the room at the hallway's end beside her sister, Becky. The following morning, Deborah awoke to a scene of subtle chaos, marking the inception of her ordeal. The front door was ajar, the family dog wandering restlessly, and a set of curtains lay on the floor, with the mosquito net appearing to be forcibly removed. Jessica was missing. Her absence was accentuated by Becky's ominous statement attributing her disappearance to a man with a magic hat and beard. A state of panic ensued as Deborah combed through every conceivable hiding spot, hoping to find Jessica playing hide and seek. Her efforts were futile, leading her to frantically search the surroundings of her home, eventually reporting Jessica missing at 9 a.m. The ensuing investigations by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department revealed no signs of a struggle nor any missing items from the house, apart from the papers scattered on the bedroom floor. The conjectures pointed to a potential kidnapper entering through the back window, abducting Jessica without waking her, and exiting through the front door. Search operations extended to the neighboring woods and abandoned structures in the predominantly rural area of Red Bank, especially rural back in 1986. The speculations, searches, and Becky's consistent statement about the man with the magic hat continued to haunt the family, embodying the relentless pursuit of truth and justice in the light of such grim circumstances. They searched many woods and areas with small streams and ponds for Jessica. Searches were made using off-road vehicles across large areas filled with nature. The sheriff's department sent a plane to fly over the area, hoping to find some trace of the girl, but none of the searches were successful. Deborah was taken to the sheriff's department to answer questions about what happened in the last 24 hours. She insisted she didn't know what happened to Jessica, but was sure about who did it. She blamed her ex-boyfriend for taking Jessica, but he said he didn't know where she was. The police also looked into Jessica's father, who was in California at the time. No charges were made against them. On June 7, the FBI and South Carolina law enforcement joined the search. Bulletins were sent nationwide. This was 10 years before the Amber Alert system and way before the internet era, so communication between departments could be slow and cumbersome. The sheriff's department tapped Deborah's phone to monitor all incoming and outgoing calls in case someone called with ransom demands. The police told reporters they believed Jessica was taken from the mobile home and didn't walk away on her own. Weeks into the investigation, the detectives only had one physical clue found at the home. A fresh fingerprint was found on the open window at the back of the house, believed to be the point of entry on June 5. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, but no matches were found. In September 1986, the sheriff in charge announced they had a suspect but didn't have enough proof to charge him. The suspect had failed a polygraph test, but since those aren't admissible in court, it wasn't enough for an arrest. After this, there were few glimmers of hope in the following years. In 1987, police in Kansas contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, saying they had a girl matching Jessica's description. Deborah flew to Kansas hoping to see her daughter, but it wasn't Jessica. Deborah returned to South Carolina, determined to keep Jessica's case alive. She and the sheriff often disagreed about the case and argued over the investigation. Deborah decided to conduct her own investigation and keep Jessica's case in the public eye. In June 1989, Deborah told the state newspaper she had found fibers in an abandoned car connected to a family friend serving time in North Carolina for assault. This was a major revelation. 2 years earlier, Deborah had received a letter from an inmate in North Carolina claiming his cellmate had confessed to abducting and killing a 4-year-old child in 1986. The cellmate, Thomas McDowell, was a registered sex offender living in Lexington County at the time of Jessica's disappearance and was known to the Gutierrez family. Thomas claimed he had killed Jessica because she recognized him and said he had thrown her body into a landfill. Thomas also said he had a beard and was wearing a tall cowboy hat at the time of the abduction. Thomas' cellmate not only informed Deborah but also contacted the police with this information. This led investigators to extensively interrogate Thomas, who agreed to disclose every detail about the crime to the detectives. However, he demanded immunity in exchange. Of course, it wasn't a deal the state was willing to make, so he remained in prison in North Carolina, and Jessica's case officially went unresolved. Deborah felt frustrated and angry. In 1989, she told the state newspaper that it felt like they had no rights and that the system wasn't working for the victims. She was particularly upset that no charges were brought against Thomas. After all, he had confessed, and his version matched the events of June 5. But there was something even more surprising. Thomas's fingerprints were taken and found to match the fingerprint found on the Gutierrez family house window. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, Deborah publicly criticized a Lexington County Sheriff's Department and accused them of mishandling her daughter's case. She said that for years she had been afraid of what would happen if she dared to contradict the sheriff, a powerful figure in South Carolina. But after 2 decades, she wanted the case to move forward and knew she needed media attention to achieve it. Local news had access to a recorded telephone call between Deborah and the sheriff in June 1986, just a few days after Jessica's disappearance. In the call, recorded by the Sheriff's Department's wiretapping unit, Deborah argued with him about the case, concerned and demanding answers as he was pulling investigators off the search. The sheriff replied that he would give answers when he had them, and then threatened to pull all his agents off the case and send them home if she interfered with him. Of course, Deborah was angered by the sheriff's response, viewing it as a threat to her daughter's case. She asked him what the people who elected him would think if he abandoned Jessica, and he responded that they could elect him or not because he didn't really care what they did. In 2007, when the call transcript was made public, the sheriff said he remembered that Deborah had accused him of favoritism and not handling the case properly, and it had hurt his feelings. Deborah also expressed her frustration with prosecutor, indicating that she had been trying for years to get other agencies to take over the case, but he had not allowed it. The case was even reviewed by the prosecutor in 2007, but no action was taken to charge or prosecute any suspects. When consulted about it, he stated that most of the evidence was inadmissible, and the little that could serve had an explanation and a reasonable doubt. He also said that without a body, the state would need much more evidence to secure a conviction. After this, the case fell back into obscurity, but its main protagonists were generating their own headlines. In 2014, Sheriff James Metz was charged in federal court with 10 counts of bribery and wire fraud, for which he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. In 2016, prosecutor Donnie Myers was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a utility pole and abandoning the vehicle. He was fined $1,000 and retired from public service in 2017. In 2021, 35 years later, the case sparked renewed interest. Sheriff Jacob, who was elected to office after James went to prison, announced that the county would collaborate with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to take a new look at Jessica's disappearance. In January 2022, finally, there was a breakthrough in the case. Police arrested 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell in connection with Jessica's disappearance. The subject, whom the child's mother had always suspected, was considered a person of interest in the case but was never followed up on. He resided in Lexington County in 1986. He was arrested at his home and confined to the county detention center. After the arrest, Thomas was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary for the disappearance and death of Jessica Gutierrez. Based on the arrest warrant media outlets have accessed, authorities identified a fingerprint of the suspect at the victim's house. However, it was not disclosed where the fingerprint was found or when it was identified as belonging to Thomas. Regardless, Deborah was aware of the existence of this fingerprint for years, and it was discovered on a window. For her, this was conclusive proof that he committed the crime, as she cleaned her windows every night, and only Jessica's kidnapper would have touched the glass afterward. In the same arrest warrant mentioned, authorities stated that the man was later identified in a photo lineup, and they also had evidence against him that he had told others he had kidnapped and killed the girl. After revisiting the case in 2021, special agents from the FBI and state prosecutors visited the area. Law enforcement agents from South Carolina assisted in interviewing over 125 people. The investigation was extensive, with over 3,500 pages of records reviewed, and 10 FBI field officers were involved in reviewing Jessica's case. The official statement indicated that the arrest was made possible thanks to many years of dedicated investigative work by local, state, and federal partners, as well as the determination of citizens who never forgot Jessica. Jessica's body has never been found, but perhaps this time, the subject will cooperate with authorities about the facts and disclose the location of the little girl. Deborah Gutierrez is still alive, but the long years waiting for answers have taken a toll on her. Her mental health has been affected by her daughter's disappearance, and this time it was Jessica's sister who spoke on her behalf after learning about the suspect's arrest. She said that her family never thought this day would come. She added that her mother fought tirelessly for 36 years for justice for Jessica, praying not only for a conviction, but also for the death penalty. She expressed gratitude on behalf of her family to everyone involved in the arrest of the man whom she described as an evil monster. Paradoxically, Thomas's neighbors considered him a quiet and reserved person who transported his work materials in a van and didn't seem to be a violent individual. Unfortunately, they will have to wait until the trial to find more answers. Apparently, Thomas has not admitted to the crime and has not disclosed what he did to Jessica. And that's the case for today. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you in the next episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.